You're listening to Edgereel, skill thrills and business chills. Join hosts Laura and Brian as they explore the skills and insights you need to succeed in today's business world. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Today we're tackling something that I think we can all relate to, and that's how we learn and remember things in this world of just constant information coming at us.
Right.
It feels like my attention span is shrinking by the minute.
Well, and everybody's, trying to find the solutions for us. How do we capture that and keep learning? And one of the things that has really become very popular is microlearning.
Okay.
These small little bite-sized learning nuggets that we're seeing everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, from videos to even these apps that you can use for learning languages, it's microlearning.
So let's break that down just a little bit. When we say microlearning, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
What's that look like?
So we're talking about 2 to 15-minute learning bursts.
Okay.
Instead of sitting down for a 5-course meal,
Yeah.
you're just grabbing a quick snack.
Okay, so like a little snack for your brain.
Exactly. And just like snacking, it can be good or bad.
True.
It all depends on what you choose. And so microlearning has its pros and cons, just like snacking does.
Gotcha.
And so the article that we're going to be diving into today is titled Microlearning, Knowledge in Bites or Just a Snack.
Okay.
And it really takes a deep dive into the different aspects of microlearning, and it draws some really fascinating parallels between the way that we learn and the way that we eat.
Interesting. So there's like a whole science behind it then. It's not just based on just this trend.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really interesting.
Absolutely. And it's really rooted in some pretty fundamental principles of cognitive science.
Okay.
One of those is called cognitive load theory.
Okay.
And essentially what this recognizes is that our brains have a very limited capacity for processing information.
At one time?
Yes, at any given time.
Okay.
If you have too much coming at you at once, it's like trying to shove, a week's worth of groceries into a tiny refrigerator.
It's not going
to fit. Things are going to get lost.
Right, yeah, you got to unpack as you go. That makes a lot of sense because I know, like, when I'm sitting down trying to prep for something, to learn something new quickly, sometimes my brain's just like, I can't.
Totally.
Like, I'm full.
Absolutely. And that's where microlearning can really come in
Okay.
to help with that, because it breaks down the information into these bite-sized chunks. So it reduces that cognitive overload and it allows our brains to actually absorb what we're trying to learn.
Okay, so instead of just like shoving it in there, we're taking those little bites.
Exactly.
And that makes me think of, this has got to be where that whole spacing effect comes in.
Yeah, right.
You got it.
Because it's like, I remember when we had to wait a whole week for the next episode of our favorite show.
Right.
And now you can just binge it all, but is that actually good for our brain?
Right. And, back in the day, we didn't know. But that anticipation actually was good for our memories.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the spacing effect, what it tells us is that we remember things better when they're spaced out over time.
Okay.
And there are breaks in between.
And so it gives our brain a chance to really process the information.
Okay.
Make those connections.
Yeah.
And then move that information from our short-term memory to our long-term memory.
So, like, actually retain it.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Just like if you were to savor a delicious meal and you're taking bite by bite, you're able to appreciate it more than if you're just going to scarf it down.
So no more binge learning.
Well,
I'm guilty of that sometimes.
I think it's more about designing a balanced learning diet.
Okay.
Sometimes you need that quick snack, and that's where microlearning can be super effective.
Yeah.
But for those deeper dives, those more complex topics, you want to make time for a really hearty meal.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I will say, even when I sit down for like a nice meal, sometimes I still forget what I ate like 2 hours later.
Yeah.
So is there something to be said about that?
Well, that's the forgetting curve that we all have.
Yeah.
But there was a psychologist, Herman Ebbinghaus, and his research showed that we actually forget a large amount of information very quickly.
Okay.
And it's shocking, almost 50% within an hour.
Oh my gosh. Seriously?
Yeah. So like what you learned this morning,
Yeah.
half of it's gone.
Well, that's probably why I can't remember what I had for breakfast.
Exactly.
Oh, no.
It's the curse of the human brain. But thankfully, there are ways to combat this.
Okay, good.
And that's where microlearning comes in.
Okay.
Because if you're revisiting those concepts in those short little bursts, it's reminding your brain, hey, remember this
Okay.
before you hit the delete button.
So it's like setting little reminders throughout the day. I like that.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're talking about you know how it works with our brains, the science behind it, but
Yeah.
what about the benefits?
Right.
Like, for our everyday lives, how can this actually, be helpful?
Yeah.
Especially for those of us who have,
People are
life.
very busy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, how can this be helpful?
Yeah. And a lot of it comes down to flexibility.
Okay.
Being able to learn anytime, anywhere at your own pace.
Okay.
And in fact, I think it's 58% of employees said that they would be more likely to engage in training if it were offered in shorter bite-sized chunks.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because you can just fit it in those little pockets of time.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so it's really about fitting it into your lifestyle.
Okay.
And another thing is that it can be more engaging.
Okay.
If you
Really
think about
fair.
it, it's kind of like it's a game show for your brain.
Right. Because you're not just sitting there with like pages and pages of notes.
Exactly, boring, right?
Right.
So it keeps things interesting,
Okay.
a lot more interactive.
So like what would be an example of that? Like how are they making it more interactive?
Yeah, so a good example is Duolingo.
Okay.
Have you heard of Duolingo?
Yeah.
They have over 500 million users
Wow.
that are using their platform to learn languages through these bite-sized lessons.
So it's kind of like gamifying it in a way.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like you're getting a little reward every time you complete a lesson.
Well, yeah, you get those little points and you're like, yes.
Exactly. It's like, I'm learning.
I get it.
Look at me. I can order a coffee in Italian.
Right. Exactly. That's awesome. So, but I do have to say, it kind of feels a little too good to be true.
Right?
So like, are textbooks obsolete?
That's a great question.
Is that it?
And that's what we're going to get into in a little bit.
Yeah. Because it does sound like one of those things where it's like, is this the solution to everything?
Right.
Like, I don't know. I feel like there's got to be some caveats here.
Right. And the article actually mentions this too.
Okay.
They said you wouldn't want your pilot to be trained just from watching a 5-minute video.
Yeah. That's fair on how to take off and land a plane.
Exactly.
Yeah. No thanks.
So, there are definitely limitations.
Okay.
You're not going to get the full picture.
Right.
With just these tiny little snippets of information.
Okay. So it's not going to work for everything.
Right.
Like I can see where, if it's something that you really need to understand in depth, that's where maybe this isn't the best approach.
And it's interesting because they made another analogy in the article.
Okay.
They said it's like trying to understand a joke.
Okay.
If you only hear the punchline,
Okay.
you're not going to get it.
You need the setup.
You need the setup. You need the context.
Exactly.
And I think that's really important when we're talking about microlearning because
Okay.
you're not always getting that full context.
Right.
You might be getting these little pieces, but you're not seeing how it all fits together.
So how do we know then when microlearning is a good approach and when we need to maybe do a little bit more of a deeper dive?
Right. Well, and they talked about this too.
Okay.
Microlearning is really good if you're trying to reinforce skills that you already have.
Okay.
So, let's say, for example, you have a big presentation and you just need a quick refresher
Okay.
on, public speaking tips or something like that.
Right. Just like the key points?
Yeah, just the key points.
Okay.
That's where microlearning could be really helpful.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or if you need some just-in-time information.
Okay. So like when you're on the job and you're like, oh, how do I do this thing?
Exactly. That's a perfect example.
Okay.
So let's say you're trying to use a new software program at work
Okay.
and you just need to know how to do one specific thing.
Right.
You don't need to know every single bell and whistle.
No, just the thing that I need to solve this one problem right now.
Exactly. And so you can quickly watch a 2-minute video
Oh,
or,
wow.
read a quick article
Okay.
and it gives you that information right when you need it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And that can be really valuable in today's workplace.
Right. Because who has time to like sit down and go to a whole training?
Exactly. Everybody's busy. So being able to have access to that information right when you need it is key.
Oh, okay. This is really interesting. So I'm kind of curious now. Are businesses actually using this?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
like, is this something that we're seeing out there in the real world? Because it seems like everywhere I turn, there's like a new app or platform that's like, learn this new thing in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's definitely trending. And I think a big part of that is companies are realizing that, especially now, you can't just have, these day-long trainings that people go to.
Right. No one has time for that.
Right. People are busy. They're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so they need something that's quick and easy and digestible.
Okay.
And so microlearning really fits in with that.
So it's not just like a trend. It's actually like a solution to a problem.
Right. Exactly.
That's really interesting. Okay.
And the article even gave some examples of companies that are already doing this,
Okay.
like Google.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They're using it for all kinds of things, from like
Okay.
onboarding new employees to diversity and inclusion training.
Oh, wow.
They even created their own internal platform.
What?
Yeah, it's called Whales.
Well,
Whales, I know. And it basically delivers this, bite-sized content to employees whenever they need it.
oh, that's kind of cool. So we're feeding our brains like whales
I love it.
with these little micro-learning snacks.
Yes.
So funny.
But it's a great point, though, because I think what a lot of people don't realize is that you can use this for so many different things.
Okay.
It's not just for like hard skills.
Right.
You can use it to promote diversity and inclusion. You can use it for professional development.
Yeah.
Even spark creativity.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So it really does have a lot of potential, I think.
So now I'm curious about, what about education?
Mhm.
Or are we going to see microlearning replace classrooms?
Right. And that's the question everybody's asking.
Right.
Is this the end of school as we know it?
Right.
And I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah.
I think there's definitely a place for traditional learning,
Yeah.
but I do think we're going to see more of a blended approach.
Okay. So like a little bit of both.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because they both have their strengths, right?
Right.
So microlearning can be great for delivering that foundational knowledge,
Okay.
reinforcing those key concepts,
Okay.
but it can't replace those richer experiences that you get in a classroom.
Right. Like actually interacting with people.
Exactly. And, hands-on activity
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
and discussions.
So it's kind of like we were saying before. It's about finding that balance.
Exactly.
That's so interesting.
Like that sweet spot.
Yeah.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
You got to have all the flavors.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, this has been super interesting. I learned a lot.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
I feel like if we can kind of sum up everything that we talked about, it seems like microlearning isn't going anywhere.
It's not a fad, no.
It's here to stay.
Right.
But it's not about replacing everything else. It's about just figuring out how it fits in.
Yeah, it's about giving you more options.
Right. And like you were saying, kind of tailoring your learning journey
Exactly. Find what works for you.
to what you need.
Exactly.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for this. This was great.
Yeah, this was fun.
And to all of our listeners out there, happy learning.